Texas, 2043. The air smelled of beef stew and cornbread, but it tasted like betrayal the moment my sister opened her mouth. Face it, Lee, you're not even blood. Mom and Dad only dragged you in as a charity case. You've been nothing but a parasite. The word parasite hit harder than a slap. My hand froze midair, the spoon slipping, crashing against my plate like a gunshot. I turned to Dad. He kept chewing, eyes locked on his food as if silence could erase what was just said. I turned to Mom. Her knuckles were white, twisting the napkin until threads came loose. Nobody denied it. Nobody said, "That's not true." The only sound in the room was the relentless tick, tick, tick of the clock on the wall, each beat pounding against my chest. The stew on the table went cold, but my skin burned with shame. In that moment, I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even human. I was a shadow sitting at a table that was never really mine. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small, sharp thought whispered, what if she's right? That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, the ceiling cracked like an old scar staring back at me. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, my sister's words replayed, sharper and sharper. Parasite, not even blood. And the silence of my parents. That was the part that hurt the most. Memories started crashing down like glass, one after another, each one suddenly making sense in a way I didn't want it to. I was 10, standing in front of the mirror on my birthday, clutching a cheap plastic necklace. "Do I look like you, Mom?" I asked. She froze, gave me a nervous smile, and changed the subject. At family reunions, I'd catch whispers slicing through the air. "She doesn't look like anyone in this family." And when I turned to see who said it, the laughter would cut off, too fast, too guilty, and the decisions, always the decisions. Vacations planned without me. Family photos with me pushed to the edge of the frame, as if I were tagging along in someone else's life. Back then, I brushed it off, told myself I was sensitive, overthinking. But tonight, her words pulled the puzzle pieces into place. My chest felt like it was caving in. The house that raised me didn't feel like home anymore. The people who raised me maybe never wanted me. Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed my phone. My fingers trembled as I typed into Google. "How do you know if you're adopted?" Thousands of results appeared. Warning signs, stories from strangers. Every bullet point felt like it was written about me. And with my heart pounding, I clicked the button that could change everything. Order DNA kit. It was such a small click. But for me, it felt like jumping off a cliff, praying there'd be truth waiting at the bottom. The package arrived 2 days later. A small white box, ordinary to anyone else. But to me, it felt heavier than the whole house. I locked myself in the bathroom, swabbed my cheek, sealed the envelope, and dropped it into the mailbox. The clang of metal echoed in my chest like a verdict. Then the waiting began. 2 weeks. 14 endless days. Every morning I checked my email before I even got out of bed. Every night I refreshed the inbox until my eyes burned. Some nights I dreamed of being shoved out the front door with a suitcase. Other nights, I dreamed of bloodlines snapping like broken threads. At work, I barely heard a word anyone said. At dinner, I pushed food around my plate until it went cold. All I could think about was one question. Who am I really? On the 12th night, I woke up gasping from a nightmare. In it, my parents stood over me, their faces blurred, whispering, "You don't belong here." I bolted upright, heart hammering, drenched in sweat. By the 14th day, my body was running on nerves and caffeine, and then the notification finally came. Subject, your DNA results are ready. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the laptop. The coffee on the table had gone cold hours ago, untouched. I clicked. The screen flickered, loading. And then the words appeared, sharp and undeniable. 999% biological child of both listed parents. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air seemed to vanish from the room. I wasn't adopted. I wasn't the outsider. I was their only biological child. The laptop screen glowed in front of me, but my world went dark. If I was the real daughter, then who was my sister? That night, I couldn't sit still. The DNA results burned in my mind like a neon sign I couldn't turn off. If I was their real daughter, then why did my whole life feel like a lie? And why did my sister, Emma, always act like she was the only one who belonged? The questions pushed me back into the house I once called home. The place was too quiet, too still, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. I found myself standing in front of my grandfather's study. No one ever touched this room after he died. The air was heavy with dust and old books, like time itself had stopped inside. I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, a sound that made the hair on my neck rise. The desk sat in the corner, solid oak, scarred with decades of use. I remembered being told as a kid, "Don't ever go through his things." But tonight, I had to. The top drawer was locked. I knelt down, tugged harder, until the old wood creaked and finally gave way. Inside, stacks of yellowed envelopes, brittle with age. My hands trembled as I slid one free. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandfather's slanted, careful script. I unfolded the paper. The words blurred at first, my eyes refusing to believe what I was seeing. But as I read, each sentence carved itself into me. Adoption papers finalized for Emma. Keep this private to protect her. Emma, my sister, the one who spent years calling me a parasite, the one who told me I didn't belong. The truth hit like a second earthquake. All along, I wasn't the outsider. She was. The room spun. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I pressed the letter to my chest, the paper trembling against my heartbeat. I didn't storm out to confront anyone. I didn't scream. Instead, I folded the letter back into its envelope, slid it into my bag, and walked out of that study without a sound. Because the real storm was only just beginning. I drove home that night with the envelope burning in my bag like it carried fire. When I laid it on my kitchen table, I couldn't stop staring at it, the thin paper that could shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Slowly, I spread it all out. The DNA results, the adoption papers, the old family photos where the resemblance was painfully obvious if anyone had ever cared to look. Piece by piece, the table turned into an altar of truth. But truth is dangerous. My first instinct was to destroy it, shred it, burn it, pretend I'd never seen it. Because once it left this room, there'd be no turning back. Yet my fingers refused to let go. Instead, I scanned every page, one by one, the light from the printer flickering like lightning in the dark. I saved copies to a hard drive. I emailed them to myself, to a cloud folder no one else could reach. I even printed duplicates and tucked them into a lockbox under my bed, because this secret, this proof, wasn't going back into a drawer. And still, my chest ached. I thought of Mom's trembling hands, Dad's silence at the dinner table, Emma's cruel smirk. Would exposing this make me finally free? Or would it chain me forever to the wreckage of a family built on lies? I sat there until dawn, the first light of morning spilling across the papers, turning the ink into a dull gray. My eyes burned, but my decision had never been clearer. For years, I begged for a place at their table, but the truth had already set my chair on fire. I whispered it out loud, steady and final, as if I needed to hear my own voice believe it. Tomorrow, I stopped being silent. Sunday came again. Mom called another family dinner like nothing had ever happened. The smell of roast chicken filled the kitchen, golden skin crackling, but to me it smelled like smoke before a fire. We sat down. Same scarred wooden table, same chipped glasses, same silence hiding under small talk, and across from me, Emma, arms crossed, that same smirk like she'd already won a game I hadn't even played yet. Halfway through dinner, she leaned back in her chair, loud enough for every word to stab the air. "Honestly, Lee, I don't even know why you keep showing up. You've never been one of us." My fork scraped against the plate as I set it down. No shaking hands this time. No tears. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, thick, heavy, undeniable. I placed it in the center of the table. "Funny," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm, "because these say otherwise." Emma frowned, snatched the folder, and flipped through the pages. First, the DNA report, then the adoption papers. Her face drained of color with every line her eyes traced. "This is fake," she hissed, her voice cracking as she slammed the papers back down. "You forged this. You're pathetic enough to make this up just to feel important." I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "Those signatures, that's Mom, that's Dad. And even if you rip those papers up right now, it won't matter. Copies are safe. The truth isn't going back in a drawer." Mom gasped, her hand half reaching for Emma but freezing midair. Dad shut his eyes, shoulders slumping like a man who'd been carrying a stone too heavy for too long. "Tell her," Emma screamed, turning to them desperate. "Tell her she's lying." But silence filled the room. Silence so thick it pressed against my skin. "Say it!" She shrieked again, her voice breaking, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. But Mom couldn't speak. Dad wouldn't look at me. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't me who felt like the outsider. It was her. Emma's chair screeched back as she shot to her feet, waving the papers like they were burning her hands. "You'll regret this, Lee. You'll regret ever digging this up." But even as she shouted, her eyes betrayed her, wide, frantic, terrified. I stayed seated, my voice steady as stone. "No, Emma, the only thing I regret is letting you make me feel small for so long." The room went dead quiet. The roast chicken sat untouched, cooling in the middle of the table, and the family that once pretended to be whole was cracking apart right before my eyes. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner, filling the silence like a dirge. Emma stood rigid, clutching the papers as if squeezing them tight could make the words disappear. Her voice came out jagged, high-pitched, desperate. "This is a lie. You're jealous. You forged this because you've always wanted to replace me." Her hands shook so violently that the pages crumpled. But her eyes, those wide, glassy eyes, already betrayed the truth she refused to say out loud. Mom finally whispered, barely audible, "Emma!" Just her name, nothing more, no denial, no defense. Her hand hovered uselessly in the air, trembling before falling back into her lap. Dad sat frozen, his elbows on the table, his face buried in his palms. For the first time, he looked small, like the secret he'd carried had finally broken him in half. Emma's chair screeched against the floor as she stumbled back, her chest heaving, the papers shaking in her fists. "You're not family, Lee," she spat, though her voice cracked like glass. "You'll never be family." I rose slowly, pushing my chair back into place with deliberate calm. My voice was steady, steady in a way it had never been before. "No, Emma, you were the one who was never family. You just made sure I believed it." She went pale, her mouth opening and closing with no words left to throw. I gathered my folder from the table. No one tried to stop me. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Emma. The air was thick, suffocating as I walked toward the door. Behind me, Emma's sobs cracked through the silence, half fury, half fear. Mom sat frozen, tears brimming but unspilled. Dad never lifted his head. The door shut behind me with a final, echoing thud. And just like that, the house that once made me feel like a stranger was now the one trapped in its own lies. The night air hit my face like a release. Cool, sharp, honest, everything the house behind me wasn't. For years, I begged for a place at that table. I twisted myself into silence, into smiles, into someone small enough to fit into their story. But the truth had always been bigger than their lies. I slid into my car, the folder safe on the passenger seat. The headlights cut across the empty road, stretching out into the Texas night like an invitation. Behind me, a house filled with secrets collapsing under their own weight. Ahead of me, something clean, something mine. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was stepping into who I really was. My voice broke the quiet, steady and sure, as if I were declaring it to the world itself. All my life, I thought I was the outsider. Turns out I was the root. And the one who called me a parasite was never family to begin with. The engine hummed beneath me, steady and alive. And as the road opened wide, so did the truth. I didn't need their permission. I didn't need their acceptance. I was free. And this time I wasn't asking for a seat at anyone's table. I was building my own.